Good morning. How we all doing? We about to get into the playroom. And I'm your host, Flav. Here we go. So we got a guest, by the way. So this is going to be exciting. First and foremost, welcome to the playroom.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
You're welcome. This is a great week to start, an amazing podcast like this. Thank you for scheduling on a Monday. It's great to have you here because every time I'm on this playroom discussion board, there's always great things that come out because there's some things you will never find on Google that you will find in a podcast.
Yes, for sure. So, yeah, I listened to a couple of them. I really like the one you had with, I'm going to butcher her name, but the woman from Nigeria.
Olamide?
Yes, Olamide, yes. Very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a very, very, it was not planned. Let me say it like that. Because usually what I love about podcasting is that it's unscripted. And just like for me, I'm into music, so I'm very articulate with perfection, quality, all those technical stuff. But podcasts, hey, we can say anything. Yeah. So that was a really good insight, just to let people know about the NSARS movement and the protests because we just want a better lifestyle. That's all we're asking for. So she brought in a lot of good insights and, at least people were able to have a listening ear to know what is going on in that side of the world apart from just what the media tells everybody, Yeah,
I support some ministries out there. So it's always mindful. I'm always mindful of what's going on out there in Nigeria. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So now we are in the We Don't Play radio podcast station, and I want to know so much about what you do because your profile is outstanding. And
thank you.
You're welcome. So I really want to let you have the floor as we begin.
Okay.
And you can tell me more about your digital marketing, your business, background. What's the backstory? How did you get here in the first place?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in small business. My parents had a small Italian bakery, and they were amazing bakers, but unfortunately they didn't know what they didn't know about growing a business. And so at the age of 12, that business failed, and we lost everything. We lost the house, the car. I even had to give up my dog. And so it was a really challenging time. That kind of started me with understanding my purpose that would carry me through the rest of my life.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I did was I went to college to learn entrepreneurship and left college with a degree and started another bakery. This time it was one of the first bakeries that was online. And so we were able to take a cake, put a photo on it when those were first coming out, and mail it anywhere in the country. And because of that, we won Best New Product at the New York Incentive Show and landed some amazing clients. So we mailed a cake to Jennifer Lopez, to Jay-Z, to IBM, to Microsoft, to amazing companies. And, I thought, wow, I got this entrepreneurship down. I'm so brilliant. I must, what did my parents miss? Unfortunately, that business, even though we had amazing PR and SEO and clients, you name it, we had everything going for us on paper. That business also failed. And so at the age of 28, newly married with a baby on the way, I was again in a position of losing everything, had to move into my sister's basement and, struggled. And so I said to myself, clearly I don't know what I'm doing, but who does? And that's when I started my journey to work with some of the greatest companies in the world. I ended up working with Ford and ADP and Google and so many amazing companies. And then after that 10-year stint, I went back to my entrepreneur roots to share what I learned that the best companies in the world do and have that everyone else doesn't. And that really is what I call the movement to democratize marketing.
Tell me more about democratizing marketing. How does that work?
Yeah, so if you look at marketing, if you looked at it 40, 50 years ago, it was pretty straightforward. You take an ad, you put it in the newspaper, boom, you got some business. Then things got a little bit more complicated. You get an ad, you put it in radio or television or broadcast media, still can have a level of success. Then all of a sudden things got more and more complicated. So you have the internet, millions of websites, and you need a directory to organize all this. You need Yahoo. Then things got even more complicated. So they have search engines. Alta Vista, Lycos, Excite, all these search engines most people don't remember that I was working on way back in the 90s. And then Google comes along, and that changes the game for everybody. Then what happens? Google dominates, but then social media comes in, right? And then there's even more complexity, more stuff to take into account, to the point today, people are creating content constantly with Instagram. They're consuming media constantly through their phones, and you're not just competing for attention with your competitors, you're competing against Google and Amazon and Netflix. And so it makes it very, very difficult. And really there's three main challenges. Number one, there's a lot of fragmentation. So before you could pick just a couple places to advertise or market, now you have millions of choices. That's problem number one. Problem number two is once you get through there, how do you stand out? And that's the challenge called clutter. So there's so much competition for your attention. So that makes it very difficult. And then problem number three is technology. So even if you find the right place to be, and then you're able to stand out with your message, the last hurdle gets many businesses, especially small businesses, and that's how in the world do I manage the technical complexity? So you got pixels, you got code, and your websites, and tracking, and analytics, all this stuff. It really gives a huge disadvantage to marketing. So that's the marketing revolution. My solution to that is to help people through marketing and having it democratized, which means sharing really three things. What do you need to do? How do you do it? And helping businesses execute. Those three things have to happen. If you can't know what the problem is, understand it, and then execute on it or fix it, then you're not going to have success. And so that's my whole movement to democratize marketing, is to help people with those three distinct areas.
Wow. It's great that you mentioned about how it all started, because back in the day, you'd pay thousands of dollars to be on a radio 30-second segment just because it's a hot show in the morning. It's a breakfast show. But now you take that same budget and you split it across. People don't know what cost per click is. People don't know how do you actually get the results you're looking for because it's so cluttered. And then, like you said, baking. How many bakeries are out there? What makes your cake different from somebody else's cake? It's the same flour, it's the same milk, it's the same eggs, but that unique brand value that you bring as a proposition to your client or to your consumer is where you make that change. And then when you're able to say, okay, I'll democratize everything and just serve 18 to 34-year-olds. Now you're segmenting. Now you're tagging. Now you're listing. But also you have the primary, you have the secondary, you have the tertiary. So when you use this application, how do you apply all this so that you don't miss out on the audience that's supposed to listen in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of set up the bad news first. So the bad news is never been harder to be a marketer. Like you said, though, it's actually never been a better time to be a business or start a business or be a marketer for that matter, because, like you said, you can launch things very quickly. You can measure it down to the penny. You can segment your audience and know exactly and serve a specific group of people. So there's so many things you can do today that you couldn't do before. So even though it's more challenging, the opportunities have never been greater. And so this is really the crux of what my mission is really to teach how do you do that. And what I found working with so many great companies, there's really 6 drivers that impact success. And the difference between what the best companies do and what everyone else does is the best companies have a strategy. They have a plan. They're able to execute on those strategies and plans. And so the average small business owner, what I always say is they spend more time planning their birthday party, their vacation, their wedding, than they do their business. And so the crux of the problem is, planning can be a challenge. What do you do? How do you do it? Am I doing the right thing? It's expensive, it's time consuming. And so my whole mission was to take the process that the best companies had, where, at that level, you're sitting in a room with dozens of people, planning for months. It's very expensive. And you have a spreadsheet with 30 different tabs that say, okay, if this happens, you're going to do that. if this happens, you're going to do this thing. It's very complicated. And so what I wanted to do was take that process and distill it down where someone could do strategic planning in 15 minutes on a single piece of paper. And so that's what I accomplished. And so I spent the past decade year trying to figure out how to do that. And that is really the crux of democratized marketing for me. That's the tactical aspect of it. And so there's really just 6 factors that you can focus on that I'm happy to share.
Yeah, please go ahead and share them with us so that we know exactly how to, niche down.
Yeah. So I have a system called the Results Loop. Anyone can download this for free. And I don't even ask for contact information. You can go to smallstepsmanifesto.com and download the template. But I don't know if you can. We're on video, so you can probably see it behind me. But behind me, it's an infinity symbol. And this is what the Results Loop is. So I actually use it to whiteboard. You can whiteboard on it, or you can get a sheet of paper and work on it. But it doesn't matter the process. But there's 6 steps. So step number 1 is identifying the markets you're going to serve. And so this is really the first step, especially if you're a newer business. And this is where you segment your audience. And you can look at your audience on a number of factors. What is their need? What is their pain point? Where are they located? What products do they tend to buy from you? Any kind of historical data you have on what you've done before and had success, that's always a great starting point. So look at where you've had success before and do more of it. Very simple advice. Most people don't do it. Or if you're new and you're brand new, this is a good thing where you can leverage competitive intelligence. You look at your competitors. What are their blog posts about? What markets are they serving? And then that can tell you either I want to go off into that market as well or choose a different one. So you have some decisions to make. So that's the first step. The second step is very much aligned with it, closely tied. And this is your products and services, which I call your offerings. And so your products and services have to match the market you're serving. Again, fairly simple advice. Problem is most people don't do that. And so just take, for example, your pricing. If you're going after a high-end market, your pricing and your products and services have to match that, right? So if you're, I've been in the automotive industry for 15 years. And fundamentally, the car that's a Ferrari has the same stuff in it that the Volkswagen does.
Whoa.
Right? They're the same thing. In fact, Volkswagen owns Lamborghini, right? So if you're looking at that, they're not that much different. But the brand perception, how it's positioned, and the market they're serving is really what makes the difference. Because people buy that high-end car, not necessarily for what it is, but what it makes you become, right? It's a status symbol, more than anything. So it's really important to align your pricing and your product and your packaging and all these things with the market you're serving. You can go low end as well. And so if you're going lower end, you're going to have different messaging. It's more the utility of the car as an example. And so the key point here is to look at your markets and then match your products and services to those markets. And this is a great way to expand as well. So if you study and get a master's in business, for instance, you would know of something called the Ansov matrix. Ansov matrix is a fantastic way to understand how you can grow your business. And so what you do is you take a diagram and you have 2 axes. One of them is looking at your markets. The other one's looking at your products and services. And you ask yourself this question: what new markets can I serve with new products? Or what new products can I serve to existing markets? Or what new existing markets can get new products? So you just kind of go through and you have 4 quadrants. And you want to understand that, that's a great way to brainstorm what you do to grow your business to the next level.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because most people want to sell, but they don't know who they're selling to. And if you don't have qualitative analysis like surveys or polls or discussion boards, forums, things that you can be able to work on with a focus group, then you wouldn't be able to know what the client potentially would be looking for in 6 months if you don't know what to solve today. So I like the way you put the Ansov, ratio, because now it's like, now you have to understand, how much am I putting into this? Am I spending advertising money, or am I spending PR money? Am I spending influencer money, or am I spending billboard money? Why am I spending billboard money over social media? Why am I on Facebook, not LinkedIn? So is that B2B, B2C kind of model type that most people don't really understand? And like you mentioned, entrepreneurship is a big word everybody uses now. I consider myself a creative infopreneur because I have a lot of information about things that even I don't need to do myself, but if it involves you, then this is what's going to help you get forward. But also, if I want to scale forward, how are you able to segment all these things using the 6-step process you mentioned and still get to that goal without being construed by different target markets?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, wherever you are today is a result of the decisions you made in the past. And so it's not the plan that drives the success, it's really the process of planning. And what I mean by that is going through this process makes you prioritize. So you have to prioritize your time, your money, and your effort. That's really what's going to drive your success. So no matter what decision you have to make, it comes down to priorities. Because if you try to do everything, you're not going to accomplish anything. And so this process is very useful to understand, okay, which channels do I go after? And as an example, you say, my market is a younger generation. Well, maybe then I would go to Instagram as opposed to Facebook. And so it's just a starting point for prioritizing your actions. So at the end of the day, this plan is meant to be a living document that's changing as you change and your business changes, but really it's also meant to drive action in terms of your priorities. So you deploy what your plan is, and then you measure it, and then you improve it, and then you change it. And this is why, again, if you could see the diagram here, or if you download it, you'll know it's an infinity symbol. The reason why it's an infinity symbol is because it's always recursive. It's always going back. You're always revisiting it, at least on a quarterly basis, is why I recommend. Sometimes, depending on your growth and how quickly you're growing, you can do it more.
Okay. That's a great way of putting it into perspective because, like, for example, personally, I was not a fan of Pinterest at all. I didn't care about it. I knew it existed. It's been around, but I was not really paying attention to it until I went deeper into SEO treatments for websites and all these tags and all that stuff. And I realized Facebook and Pinterest are number one when it comes to listing. So why am I not on Pinterest? So I started Pinterest September 6th, and now I have almost about 36,000 monthly viewers. And I'm wondering, did I do this intentionally, or was I just planning to get there? Because I didn't have a goal strategy. I didn't say, I'm looking for 50K in a month. I just wanted to be relevant and sustainable so that people can be able to be around what I'm doing. And I realized at some point, I'll get a notification from Pinterest saying, hey, somebody tried this pin. And then I'll look at the pin and I'll be like, you made a potato bread for the family. You never knew how to make potato bread because I put it in the food board. Now you're more lenient to understanding more, and you don't know me. And the good thing is that I didn't put the business I didn't put my name under it. I put it as a business company so that you're not biased, because there's also this form of bias when it comes to picking and choosing products over services, like a Nike brand over a generic brand with the same quality, but no, because of social status, I want to have this acclamation. So how do you base those two so that you don't really fall off on your curve when it comes to marketing and budgeting, especially?
Yeah, so the question, just so I'm clear, what the question is, what's the question?
The question is like, how do you create that demand on a platform that you're probably uncomfortable with, but is needed because that's where your audience is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this actually segues perfectly to oddly enough, to factor number 3, which is value. So value is the critical component to whatever you do. And so what you want to keep in mind, that value is an exchange. And so you always want to lead with value. And there's really 3 stages of a marketing or a sales funnel, typically. It's where people don't know who you are, which I call browsers. Maybe they're in market or they're not. They're not sure. And your goal there is to get awareness. The second stage is where there's more of a consideration. They're thinking about you. This is a lot of times where you want to get a lead, so you want to get their contact information. And then finally, the end stage is where you want to get a purchase. And this is where they're buying. And so each of these stages, there's an exchange of value. So at the top of the funnel, where you're getting awareness, which is kind of where I'm in right now with your audience, right? Nobody knows who I am. And so what there is there's an exchange. I'm exchanging value in the terms, in the form of hopefully interesting content, some knowledge, etc. And what I'm getting in exchange is people's attention and awareness of who I am. The next stage is if I have something even more valuable. Maybe that manifesto, although not in this case because it is absolutely free, but a lot of times they'll have what's called a lead magnet. So it's something of more value. Maybe it's a document, maybe it's a tool, software even. People will register for that, give their contact information in exchange for use of that tool or that content, that extra value content. That's the second exchange. The last exchange is where people get a result in exchange for money. And so it's always important to keep in mind the result that they're getting as opposed to the effort that you're putting in. Because people don't care if you spent 500 hours on something if it doesn't drive the result. So the end game is really the result for them. In exchange for that, we're providing value. So that's the great way to think about whatever you're doing. So to get back to your Pinterest example, you want to lead with value and say, okay, what value am I adding to someone that doesn't know who I am, that's finding me through this pin? And then how do I drive them to the next step of wanting even more value? So if you have, the potato recipe that you mentioned, how can you drive them to, my top 10 potato recipes and get them to download it, or a tool, something to calculate the measurements or whatever it is. That's the next stage. And then you want to drive them finally to the purchase. So the key thing here is always think about the exchange of value, whether it's for attention, whether it's for even more attention, their contact information, or ultimately for them to purchase.
Yeah. It's also a great model because that's also what Facebook does when you think about awareness, consideration, and conversion. But everybody wants to go to the conversion first. And that's it's terrible. And I can say I was part of that list back then until I really knew what digital marketing was, because getting a master's in business, understanding the entertainment industry, knowing the laws, the trademarks, the patents, all this stuff, people don't think that they're valuable until it becomes an asset to you. And you're like, oh, I wish I did this 10 years before, So it's the value that you're bringing to the table that really orchestrates the value they give back to you. Because if you go to an Apple store, for example, you're going to be served really well. This space, that you can see a lot of white, that, okay, this is a place where I can eat. You can be in there and actually enjoy yourself, compared to going to another store where you can't even sit down because you're like, oh, now they don't even think about chairs, what's in their budget, what's in their inventory asset list, So those are things that you have to think about. And now that you've mentioned about value, where would you put a new business owner that is having a great idea, just like everybody has idea, but can't execute it because of 1, capital, and 2, reach, when it comes to either choosing between online or physical stores?
Yeah, so the easiest way to grow a business without capital, if you have a great product and you need to get reach, is to leverage something called joint ventures. And so what this is where you go to partners that are in that market already and have them promote it on your behalf. And what they get is a percentage of the sale, typically 50%, at least 50%, sometimes even higher if you're a brand new business and you want to go to an influencer. And so if you want to hit the market strong, it might be worth to give up even 75% and just cover your costs, because this is where the back end of your funnel can make sense. So if you can acquire a customer. So one thing to step back, one of the key things that business owners have to understand is 2 metrics. One, the lifetime value of a buyer. So how much money are they going to drive for you in terms of revenue, and more importantly, profit over the lifetime of working with you. So if they're with you for a year and they spend, $1,000 and you make, $500, you want to know both those numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to also take into account your cost per acquisition. So how much does it cost to acquire that? And so the nice thing with joint ventures is you don't really have to worry about that. You're just giving away the percentage, but you have to know your profitability though in that case, because if you only have a 50% profit margin, so if it costs, $500, if you're giving them a $500 commission and, your cost is $500 to make it, then you're really at a zero-sum game and you got problems, especially if you're a small business and not funded. So you want to really look at those different ratios. So again, just to make it simple, how much does it cost to acquire that customer? And then what's the lifetime value of that customer? But the cheapest way typically and to reduce risk is through a joint venture. So what you do is you email people. I'm doing this actually right now for myself because I have a podcast software that I just built because I did some pivots and I'm moving things around. And so I created software. And what I'm doing is I have a list of 50 podcast influencers that I'm giving the demo to for free, or the software access, and then hopefully they'll promote it on my behalf, and I'll give them half the money, as an example. Because I'm in that position too. So my agency, declined in revenue, so I had to pivot into a new market that was growing. I thought podcasts would be fantastic, so I went into that market, and then I am actively looking for joint. So this isn't just theory. This is something I'm actually doing myself. But by far, the answer to your question, joint ventures are fantastic for this kind of thing.
That's a great thing to think about, because if you mention joint ventures, there's another potential, like angel investors, that could help with your business when you grow, because these are people like, angels, you don't know them, but they know you when they know your business, or they know what you're about. And you can be able to grow your feed and just be, authentic with them, because people go on Shark Tank, for example, they pitch an amazing idea, they don't get it, but 2 years later you see they're the number one on Forbes list. You wonder, okay, what did you do behind these closed doors? So it's about that value you're bringing, why you're even bringing the value in the first place, and then is there a need for it? Because everybody wants to make oranges, but if your oranges have a kind of citrus that is imported from Mexico, for example, and this is adding nutritional value to your lifestyle, and you add $1.50, then you're actually bringing value to that person's lifestyle, So It's not about, oh, it looks nice or it feels good. It's like, am I going to buy this again? Because repeat buyers are really hard to get nowadays, honestly, from a small business standpoint. But like you mentioned with joint ventures, do they do the work for you, or do they just invest and then you have your business plan to follow through?
Okay, so just to clarify, angel investors are more investors. So these are people that will give you money to get your business off the ground.
Right.
And that can be a little risky, because they can take, a good amount of the business, take control, and even kick you out. And so that is a little risky. Joint ventures, on the other hand, are not really, there's no ownership in you. So another term for joint ventures is, in many ways, it's referred as affiliate marketing. And so this is people that have no ownership in your company. They're simply giving you the sale, the lead and the customer, essentially, for that sale. And in return, they're getting a percentage of the profit. So the angel investor is getting a percentage of your company. The joint venture partner is getting a percentage of the revenue from the sale of the product. So completely two different beasts.
Yeah.
The joint venture is the best way to do it. And in fact, that's how some of the biggest companies grow. So when I got Google's Partner of the Year award, one of the reasons we did that is because we did joint ventures. So I did a joint venture with Google, and we were able to drive a lot of new clients in the automotive industry to Google. And I also did a joint venture with Ford Motor Company. And so we did 2 joint ventures, and everybody grew. The agency grew, Ford grew, and Google grew. And so this is what a lot of big companies do. They do joint ventures. You see this, and sometimes some joint ventures are more formal than others. So in some joint ventures, it's literally they just hand you the client, you sell it, and you give them a commission. Other times you might have more alignment in terms of like Starbucks might come out with a coffee. It's got a special Hershey's syrup or something in it.
Right.
And so Hershey's doesn't have ownership in Starbucks or vice versa. In this example, they're just aligning themselves. They're doing a joint venture to sell a product that has both of their branding in it. And so this happens all the time in the corporate world. Small businesses don't even think about it. I have no idea why, but it's probably the easiest and quickest way to grow without a lot of risk.
I think the next question would be somebody thinking about this, let's say potentially wanting to drive this information through, would not know how to start or even how to get through to Google, for example, or Ford. How do they even start? Do they Google it, or do they have to get a referral? What's the process, and of course the timeline, so that they are not overly drenched in stress?
Yeah, well, at the corporate level, that would be very difficult. I was in the corporate world when I did that. I did not do the joint venture as an individual, so I would not recommend going to Google out of the gate. What I would do is start with smaller companies, entities that are at your level, and so, or maybe a little bit ahead of you. So not miles ahead of you, but a little bit ahead of you. So if you have, 10,000 Instagram followers, find someone that has 20, right, or 50 even. but don't, and you can even go with smaller players, but typically you want to work your way up to bigger players. And so I would reach them. So I would come up with an email, send it out to them, and then, give them your product for free. Hopefully they'll like it and they'll want to promote it. Because if you're adding value to them, it only helps them if they're adding that same value to their audience. And if they get money in exchange for doing that, all the better.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Affiliate marketing is big now. Look at Amazon, for example. People are doing that easily with their YouTube channels, and it's driving a lot of traffic. But now with digital marketing and being more specific, now let me go into the deep blue ocean strategy type of model, where now you have an audience and there's a competition for that audience. But what you bring uniquely to that audience changes the paradigm shift. For example, a disruptive brand like Airbnb, they are very, very tech savvy and also consumer friendly, but at the same time, you'd rather go to a hotel and get that experience. So somebody who is starting a new business now would want to understand, okay, should I partner up with this company because I sell blankets? How specific should it be? And I know you mentioned you can be able to, reach out to these influencers who are a little bit higher or, more than you in terms of reach. But also when somebody wants to spend ads money and also influencer money, where is that balance, pivoted at?
Yeah. So again, just to clarify one thing. So with affiliate marketing, there's two sides to the affiliate.
Okay.
Right? There's affiliate that's doing the sale.
Yeah.
And there's the affiliate that's doing the promotion. So what I was mentioning before is being the affiliate that's doing the sale, not the promotion. So in other words, I have the product. I'm going to pay the people to promote me. So I'm going to be giving out the affiliate commission as opposed to getting it in. And that, in fact, is how Amazon grew, 20 years.
But we're going to get back shortly. Just to let you guys know, We Don't Play is a great station for information and otherwise. So you have to stay glued, stay in check, know what you're serving, know who you're serving to. Understand why you're serving in the first place, because when you understand why you're serving, then you can build that demand for attention. And then attention is going to build a lot of trust. And when you build that trust, you build retention, and eventually you make a purchase or a sale, and then that increases your value. We're going to be very business resilient. And this is part of social media, that brings in the key results. So I want to really, really thank you guys also for being on this platform and just being a part of this great success.
So we were talking about affiliate and affiliate marketing. And what I was saying is being the affiliate, in other words, getting the affiliates to sponsor you, was one of the fastest ways that Amazon grew 20 years ago. And so there's really two sides to affiliate. So you can be in the affiliate game and sell other people's products, like the blankets or whatever. That's a great business model as well. But what I was referring to is if you have a startup, one of the cheapest ways to get it out, especially if you have a fantastic product, that's really the first step, is to leverage affiliates to promote you on your behalf, because you're limiting the risk, and you're in exchange you're just giving a higher percentage of the sale.
Okay, that's a great point to put. And then if you think about the people you're actually working with, when you think about the legal side of things, how do you protect your intellectual property when it comes to digital marketing and distribution?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't worry about it too much. What I was saying, though, is I don't tend to worry too much about the intellectual property, because at the end of the day, there's very little you can do to protect it. I have been through the process of getting some trademarks and some patents. So if you have something very unusual, that's easy. So the problem is a lot of times people can change something minor, make some minor change, all of a sudden it's not, protected.
Right.
But, if someone's really concerned, it definitely makes sense to see a trademark, a patent attorney. A lot of times the basic stuff is very cheap. In terms of trademarks, a lot of times that's, practically nothing, no cost at all. So it's the patents that are more expensive. But I would see a local patent attorney in your area.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Also, the other thing is if you're thinking internationally,
yeah,
a lot of times you have to get patents in every single country. So you have to, especially as as a startup, you don't want to spend all your money trying to protect this idea, because then ultimately you might find yourself without a business. A lot of people do that. They get so nervous about protecting what they have.
Right.
They spend all their money on protection, and then they have no cash to grow, and then they're even in a bigger problem. So for the most part, I advise people, to see an attorney, of course, but if from my own personal preference, I try not to get too much protected. I focus more on the brand and building myself up, and building a great product that people won't even think about going somewhere else.
Right. That's a great point you mentioned, because I would say one ineffective way of storing your information and protecting is having a website. If you're able to have a domain name that is strictly based on your service, then you own that. And then you're able to build that relationship with people, but also people don't know where to go to get a website. People don't know what platform to use. They check on reviews, they see this and that. So I'm just speaking on behalf of people who want to get into business and have no idea about this technical stuff. So from a digital marketing standpoint, like you mentioned, pick the niche. You know exactly who you're selling to, what's the product value, why are you even bringing this value to them in the first place, do they need it, and then build that relationship model from there. But also from a website perspective, digital marketing perspective, what are some tips you can give them on being resilient in business when it comes to retaining leads, for example?
Yeah, so being resilient is really the ability to get yourself back up. And so if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to ride a roller coaster. And so what I always say, the easiest way to build your faith is to start a company, because you don't necessarily know where the next check's coming in from sometimes at certain points in your business.
Yeah.
And so to be resilient, what I learned from my mother is one of the most resilient people I know. She grew up during another pandemic, essentially. So in the late 30s, she contracted polio. And so from the age of 9 months old all the way up to 13, 14, she was unable to walk. And so I always asked her, how mentally did you withstand that? She was quarantined, couldn't see her family, had a lot of challenges, just obviously couldn't walk, and her vision was always to be able to wear high heels. And so what happened there was that the hospital, they helped her do the three things I talk about: know what to do, understand how to do it, and then finally take actions. And so for her, she started off with just being able to do some pottery to build up the nervous system, get strength. Then she was getting a little bit stronger. She was able to go in a pool and swim a little bit, until finally she was able to walk between these two rails and take small steps. And that's really the name, and that's the name of my book. I named it after her because she was the inspiration. But to have resilience, you have to be able to take small steps. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed. And you have to know what steps to take, how to take those steps, and then you have to take the action. If you do those three things, there's nothing you can't overcome.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Those are things that it's like the fundamental entrepreneurial 101 starter kit. It's that thing that you can be able to look back 5 years and say, if I wasn't resilient enough, I wouldn't be here today. And you were very right when you said the decisions you make today is based on what you made before. And
correct.
I think the underlying factor usually for people is, how do I package this? People like to use free products like Canva, all this visual display, because people love visual, content. They love things that are quick to digest, quick to use. They'll go search it on Google, find the results, and they're happy, and they'll follow you for more. But now from a business standpoint, like you have the manifesto now, from your end, how have you experienced free versus paid content when it comes to retaining a business as an entrepreneur in a competitive field like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the first thing we have to look at is, what is value? How is value packaged? And there's two kinds of value. There's real value, which is what I was talking about before. This is delivering the end result that your customer wants. It's the transformation from where they were to where they wanted to be. That's the first level of value. But the other level of value is really where you can get a lot more value in terms of money to your business. And this is perceived value. So perceived value is everything that's above that real value. So it's the people's perception. So people's perception are impacted, like you mentioned Apple before, by the branding of it in terms of, design is a huge one. The usability, all these things are what make that brand higher. From a individual perspective, it's your influence, it's your authority. This is where influencer marketing is taken off of. And so what you want to look at is with free, how do you add value where people would want to pay beyond what's free? Because people always want to move towards the free, but they will pay for things that add real value and perceived value. Real value meaning it can get the job done quicker. So yes, I might be able to get the same information on Google, but I might spend 10 hours doing it where I can get it immediately from you. Is my time worth anything? And so always looking at it from the lens of time, effort, and money. If you can save them time, if you can save them effort, and if you can save them money, you can position yourself as a better product from a real perspective. From a perceived perspective, people don't want to take a lot of risk. So if you're the authority, if you have the influence, that lowers their risk threshold, which makes you able to command more. They also look at status. And so status, there might be a status from buying from you, which is why, people spend $300,000 on one car and not so much on another. So how you package your complete offering is very important. And that's actually another course I have. It's actually not even released yet, but it's really, because I think value is something that's so misunderstood. I've put a lot of time and research into really thinking it through. But there's what I discovered is there's probably about 40 or 50 points of value. So different differentiators that you can leverage to position your company as the no-brainer. Because that's at the end of the day, your value proposition, which comes from your value, answers the question, why would someone buy from you as opposed to anyone else or do nothing at all? And so what I found is there's really 50 things that can drive that, 50 options. One of them might be your affinity in that market. So if for instance, I've been in automotive for 20 years. Someone might want to go with me because I have that experience as opposed to someone else. It might also be based off of your community. So if you have a community, someone might buy from you because they know they can network, with other people, and they might buy from you because they can find a potential sale there as opposed to just getting the product. And so all these things around that, which I call points of value, are what enable you to differentiate yourself and command a premium.
I like that, command a premium. That's a good one, because I also see, mentors, people are able to charge high ticket prices, and you wonder, I have a funnel of 100 people, but only 3 buy, but at the price of 1,000. And you're like, is that a success or is that a fail? It's below 10%, but your return rate is really high. When you think about the value you're bringing, then those 3 people leave reviews on your site, and then another 10 people see it, and then you have more customer retainability because now there's actual value, like you mentioned, that's brought in. But think about someone who doesn't even know what value is in the first place, but they just want to build a product or a service. Is there a certain strategy or a certain model type to follow, or should they go on their instincts, their local based competition? Like, how do they even get started?
Well, again, that's unfortunately I don't have it ready yet, but that's my next book. So I have a book right now that's called The Small Steps to Grow Profit, which goes through the strategic plan work.
Okay.
The book that's coming out after that is all about value. I don't even have a name for it yet, other than to tell you that it's also an infinity symbol because it's also recursive. And there's really, I think there's 7 factors I identified that drive value. So if someone wants to download the manifesto, or connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram or any of my social media on my website, I can send you an email when that book comes out. But it's probably, honestly, it's going to be like a year. But if anyone wants to see, I do have a cheat sheet on some of the points of value. I could send that over. But yeah, what I found is there's 50 things that you can look at. And what I'm planning on doing is putting really just a checklist together. And then that's an easy way to identify, the ones that would work for your particular circumstance. Awesome.
Let's also talk about product placement. How effective is product placement today? Like, you're not putting a price tag on it. You're not telling them there's no call to action. It's just there. How effective is that? Especially because you've had the corporate experience and you also have the entrepreneurial experience. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's difficult to measure, but what I can tell you is the shift of dollars has gone into that area, much more rapidly than anywhere else. So I think product placement is a great place to go. If you look at some of the studies, though, what's interesting is just about every media has declined in terms of spend, what's projected for next year, really probably due to COVID. The one area that's actually growing through all this is actually podcasting. And so that's why personally I'm putting more emphasis into podcasting. But also a lot of top flight marketers are, and a lot of people are, right? Everyone's stuck at home, so everyone and their grandmother is starting a podcast. The numbers have actually doubled. I think there was roughly 800,000 last year. Now it's already 1.5 million.
Wow.
That are in that podcast. So what I always try to tell people to do is to ride the wave that's already there. And so the easiest way to grow a company is to go into a market that's already growing, because you're going to grow and you don't have to be a fantastic business person. Just by the fact that you're in a high growth market, you'll have a level of growth. So you can make a lot of mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. If you're trying to go into a market that's already competitive, and I think you mentioned blue ocean before, that's called red ocean, because there's so much blood in the water, so much competition, very difficult to be successful. So you're always better off going, what I say, in a wave that's already there. So ride the wave. I did that with SEO. I had a lot of success because I was doing that in the late 90s. Then I rode the AdWords wave, then social media. But I really think my sense is right where you're at, where I'm at is the place to be. So I'm putting more and more emphasis myself into podcasts and into virtual summits. Anything virtual, I think, is a good place to be right now.
Right. And people would also wonder, because I do some search term keywords and I'm like, let me see what people are searching for on Google. And then I get to see that some people ask, is podcasting profitable? Are you able to monetize podcasts? And it just baffles me to think that people would ask a question like that, knowing that this is a form of radio, but just in internet format, Yeah. But I think also specifically they want to know, if I start a podcast today, how can I get this product placement that we're mentioning into a podcast, into a mid-roll, a pre-roll that actually creates that value, which is product placement? Because now you've heard a website, you're going to tap on the website, click on it, and then you're going to find other things that are in there. But from like a small business perspective, you mentioned joint ventures, which is very, very good. Do you think them getting into podcast episodes and pitching and saying, hey, how about we do some form of trade-in, does that help with the visibility? Because now you're thinking about focus, location, gender-based. There's so many metrics to think about, and knowing, okay, are these people household buyers? Are they going to buy my blankets, or are they just going to listen to the blanket story? So how do they merge the two when it comes to podcasting? Because you're also new in it as well. So how has it been for you when it comes to creating that demand, especially knowing that this is an untapped market?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So again, as always, there's two sides to the equation, right? There's being the podcast host and there's being the podcast guest or the expert, right? And so my personal strategy with podcasting as a guest is more to drive authority and trust, and I use the podcast in my other marketing. So for instance, if I have a lead or a prospect that I'm speaking to, I will send them various past podcast episodes I've been on so they can understand the authority, and almost like a PR strategy. And so it's also a great way to get my name out there. And also from a reputation standpoint, if you Google my name, you'll see the first, 100 listings are all podcasts. And so, it builds instant trust and authority for me. And so I'm not necessarily going with these podcasts to drive immediate sale. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned before. You have to always look at the exchange. So podcasting is more of an awareness medium. And so you should be focused on driving awareness for your brand, whether it's you personally or your company, in exchange for the attention. And so like we've said before, a lot of times people make the mistake of going right to the sale, which is not the best thing to do, because that's not really the purpose of this kind of medium. It's much like radio. Can you get some sales and leads? Absolutely. But, for the most part, you're better off focusing at the top of the funnel. From a host perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunity to sell, like you said, sponsorships, airtime. The key thing there is building your audience. So you have to have a big enough audience so it makes sense for people to advertise. And you also have to add, what I always advise is adding more value than just the podcast. So you want to bundle it with other things, whether it's sending out an email blast, whether it's promoting them on social media. So you can then command a higher premium, like we talked about before, because they're not just buying the commodity, which is the airtime. Obviously it's not a straight commodity because your show is different from everyone else's, but the bottom line is the more value you can add around the show in terms of extra promotion through social media, giveaways, whatever you can, the better the premium you can get for your advertisers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because when you think about awareness and product placement, they're really undervalued if you think about it, because you have a post, you have something that you want to put out there, but because you don't think they're aware about it, you would just leave it in the dust. And instead of giving people that 7 to 12 time impression standpoint and then leaving them to convert, is now where you can't really control, because you can't control someone to swipe that card. You can't control someone to make that purchase. The only way you can make that purchase convert is by, before even them getting there, they've probably known what they're about to do with that product. Like, I wouldn't buy a couch if I don't need one, So it's that kind of opportunity, necessity. Is it in the market? Is it not? If it is, why am I adding myself in here? If it is not, then okay, how can I change the paradigm shift of people, to build that, social influence? So that's a really great way of putting into it. And I would definitely want to check out your book, and see what it's about. If people want to know how they can get to you or your books, what are the platforms that are on there, and how can they get through to access your content?
Sure, yeah, probably the best way is to download my manifesto. So what I did was I took some of the best things from my book and put them into my manifesto, available for free. I don't even ask for a form to be filled out or anything. And you can get that at smallstepsmanifesto.com. And if someone wants to chat with me directly, I'm pretty accessible. You can go to my website, meettonyg.com, and connect with me on any of the social media handles through any of those. And, I can, in the terms of the value course that's coming out in the book for that, just send me an email. I'll put you on the mailing list for when that's available. Like I said, that's a ways out. But if anyone's interested in that, because I think it's such a great topic that no one really talks about, that's why I'm working on it. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to connect with me through any of those platforms. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. That's a great one. Do you have any question for me? I know what maybe from what you've seen before we got here, is there anything that sparked your attention?
Yeah, well, gosh, I'm always looking to learn more about podcasts and what's worked for you and what hasn't, because I'm looking, as I mentioned before briefly, I'm looking to launch my own podcast. So what advice would you have for someone that's launching their own?
I would say, first of all, get the right distribution platform, because there's a lot of platforms out there that have podcasts, and they're all great. None of them is, higher than the other. It's just how efficient is it to your business and how you're able to apply it elsewhere. And I use Anchor. Anchor.fm is a perfect platform because it redistributes your content to all the social platforms. They also have an embedded RSS feed, and since you have a website, it's perfect for RSS feed attraction. Also, I would say connecting your website or your podcast to websites like supercast.com. It's a company based in Toronto, not in Toronto, in Vancouver. And I don't know how they found me, but they reached out to me and they're like, hey, do you want to join the Supercast platform? And what Supercast is, it's like a podcast premium version. Like you mentioned, you have values that you want to give people. So on this podcast, which is free, now if you're in a Supercast account, you're going to connect your podcast to Supercast, and then subscribers, let's say if they pay $4.99 a month or $49 a year, and they're now getting exclusive podcasts. Let's say you have a podcast that's 1 hour long, and then you go into the nitty gritties in the 30th minute. You can strike it off, take 30 minutes into your podcast, take the full episode into your premium podcast. Then you start monetizing and telling people, hey, join this mailing list, and then you're able to now build that conversation. One thing I love about Supercast is that they have a place where you can ask questions, like ask me anything. So now they can post questions on there, they can leave their comments, and then now when you're on the next podcast, you address those points. And then they'll be like, oh, he answered my question. This is another question. Before you know it, now you're involving an engaged audience that is literally listening to what your advice is and applying it to their lifestyles, which is what I love to use. Another thing I love to use is Audrey, AUDRY.io. It's like Podmatch, but it's completely different, where you're able to connect with people outside your comfort zone, and you're able to actually search for the terms that you're interested in. Like Podmatch will be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is the number of people that I find. But on Audrey.io, you can type in business and marketing and get 50,000 results. And then it's going to show you this person posts twice a day. This is their profile. Connect to them on a messaging platform. It's really great for engagement. But also for people who have just started a podcast, I would really recommend Anchor.fm. Put your content out there. Make sure you're always embedding it to your blogs, because if you're embedding your blogs with your podcasts, or you're using Pinterest, for example, you can always build that reachability by giving people more, because not everyone's going to listen to 1 hour of a podcast, but they'll listen to 30 seconds and that could change their life. So finding those bite-sized information would really help. Another platform I use myself is StreamYard.com. You're able to connect Facebook, YouTube, I think LinkedIn, if you're also approved, all at the same time to broadcast, because at the same time, podcast is audio driven. But if you have videos and you have conferences and you have, little talks here and there, you can be able to all put that all into Anchor.fm and start building your reach from there. Another great tip is that when you create a title, like much about SEO as well. So on your title, those keywords that are channeling to that business or to that reach is where you're really focusing on, because at some point your podcast is going to start getting relative results. Like for me now, I see people like Dave Ramsey, Tim Ferriss, Gary Vee. They are on my suggested list. I didn't add none of their keywords in, but because of the value I was adding to the titles and to the search terms, that was able to give me that relatability. And of course, they're not going to give you an algorithm that doesn't work. So if I'm talking about business finance, but that's not my focus point, but I touched on it, is going to help somebody else say, okay, let me search for this, because now with Apple Podcasts, you can be able to search for a term. If you don't know the name of this podcast, We Don't Play Podcast, you can search for my name now, which is my stage name, Flav Beats, and you will see all the podcasts I was in, featured or hosted in. And now it gives that algorithm a reason to search for you more. Another great place to check out, and I just learned this from my previous interview, her name is Sarah, and she was talking about ratethispodcast.com. If you go to ratethispodcast.com, you can connect your podcast to it, let people rate you, and then they can now choose the desired preferred service that they want to get on. So there's Podbean, there's Spotify, there's Podkite. I just learned about podkite.com, and Podkite is a way you can be able to be on the rankings, because as soon as you're on all these platforms from one source, it's like you're distributing excessively that now you don't even know where people are listening from, because on Anchor it shows you the results, the statistics. And even for me, there's a section that is just all blacked out. I have listeners from Apple Podcasts, from Spotify, but there's a huge black section that is like about 53%. But I know that's coming from my RSS feed, because what's the word I'm looking for? It's uncategorized. That's the word I'm looking for. So if it's uncategorized, it doesn't mean that it's not being seen. It just means that people are probably preferring that method, as opposed to, oh, I don't have Apple, I don't have an iPhone, I don't have an Android. What do I do? If I'm always on my web, okay, I can type in anchor.fm/Tony G, and I'm going to get everything I want from there. And then you start putting your podcast, putting your name, having a very, very good picture. Because when I started my podcast last year, with the intention of just building traffic and just giving out information, because I couldn't put all that into YouTube videos at once. And when I did that, I didn't even have my face on it. And I was able to scale to about 1,000 plays within the first year. But something was like, if you don't put a face to it, sometimes they want to know who you really are. And that drives even more conversions, because when they see your face, they'll be like, okay, what is he talking about? Then you have featured podcasts, you have guest podcasts. Now you're really tapping into their market, because they're like, how do you even meet all these people where everybody's quarantined? What do you do? So now you're in this virtual space, like you mentioned, And the virtual space is now giving you an opportunity to show your skills, show what you're able to push out. And then from there with Anchor, connect it to your website, connect it to your YouTube. Another great place to check out is headliner.com. Headliner.com is great for podcasting, and it also gives you captions, waveforms. You can be able to get long form episodes. It's also auto-generated if you connect your podcast to it. So these are all different platforms that I've been able to find over time. Within the first year, I didn't even know any of this website I just mentioned to you. Wow. It was all just research. Some people will email me on my work email and say, hey, we found you here. And I'm like, oh, what is this about? Now I know Supercast. Now I know, okay, I have a subscription model. Oh, now I can have a joint mailing list. So when people find, like you mentioned, all goes down to value. If people are able to value your podcast, value your content, value whatever you're talking about, and then you're able to monetize it, I think people will pay $4.99 a month to listen to what you have to say every day, you know? So yeah. That's how I started, and now I'm not looking back.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hopefully I can, you should make that as a blog post, because that way I can get all that. I didn't write down the list, so I would love to get that as a blog post.
Oh yeah, definitely. This will be out as a blog post, and I'll also email you as well, so you can also have the exclusivity of it. And another great tip too is this website called compressor.io. If you're big on websites, if you're big on content, people don't like loading pictures slow. You know, like nowadays, this is a fast age. People want to get things quickly. So if you have a picture that's about 5 MB and you go to compressor.io, you're now going to compress that image as a lossy format to probably about 1,000 KB, which is about 1 MB. And now that 1 MB has saved people 4 MB of loading time, which of course lowers your bounce rate, which of course increases your reachability and your search results. So it's all those little technical things that can really boost your reach within a short time. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I learned a lot there, so that's good.
You're welcome. Anytime. And before we go, what's one thing you'd want to tell small business entrepreneurs that want to start, and what would be a word of advice for them to take home? If there's anything that they learned today, what would be the one thing you want to leave them with?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm a musician as well. So you mentioned that. What I learned, I played violin actually professionally for a while. And when I was in the conservatory, my teacher taught me a very valuable lesson that applies to both life and business. And that was to slow down, to speed up. And so I wanted to learn, the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, if you ever heard of it. Very difficult piece, lots of notes. And I just kind of wanted to wing it on the hard stuff, get right to the easy melodies, enjoy that, and then kind of blow through the hard stuff again. And he told me the importance of slowing down, practicing slow, taking it note by note until I can go faster and faster and get it down, as opposed to just kind of, going through it. And so it's important to slow down, to speed up, because in business, how many of us have made the wrong decisions, whether it's hiring the wrong person, doing the wrong advertising, the wrong area, just bad decisions really, like we talked about before, really hurt you and your future. And so a lot of times if you can slow down, have a strategy, have a plan, know what you need to do and how to do it, that makes life so much less painful. And so that would be my main takeaway, is to slow down and speed up, and then that will help you accomplish your goals.
Yeah, I think this has been one informative podcast that people should, rewind, listen to again, understand, Google some terms if you didn't know what they mean, because we don't have much time to explain everything. But I think this shows the infinity curve of how you can be able to build your business. And it makes a lot of sense, because I play the drums and it makes total sense. Self-taught at the age of 6, started playing the drums, understanding, okay, this is rhythm, this is beat. Now I applied that into my music. When I'm making lyrics, how am I a songwriter? Am I going to have space to breathe? Do I have the dynamic range? Do I go up? Do I go down? So all these things are just art in itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great way you mentioned slow down to speed up. I'll definitely take that into consideration too.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, thank you for joining the Playroom once again. And I didn't get a chance to ask where you are right now. Where are you located?
I'm in Connecticut, which we're in the middle of like a lot of wind, which is why my internet keeps on going out. But yeah, Connecticut's a great little area in the northeast part of the U.S. Yep.
Awesome. How is it over there? Just because you mentioned Connecticut, how is it going on with the pandemic? Are you guys okay? Are you on lockdown? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, they locked it down pretty strongly because we're so close to New York. We're not that far. Thankfully, I'm not right outside the city. That area, in Western Connecticut's much worse. I'm in Eastern Connecticut, so it hasn't been that bad. I'm in a little cow town, so it's not really that bad here. But the state of Connecticut, we were pretty locked down. It's loosened up. Now everything across the country is going back up, of course. So I don't know what the future holds. So, I just told my wife and kids, let's enjoy the summer as much as we can, get out as much as we can while it's good. Because who knows what's going to happen in the winter. So hopefully, hopefully we'll get out of this soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Where are you?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, great.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law is not too far down. There's a Savannah. I think there's a school of design. He's there.
Oh, SCAD.
Yes. Yeah, he's down there. Yeah.
Oh, that's dope. That's dope. It's an amazing school. I see a lot of potentials out there, and art is the future. It is, yeah. We have so much visual to put out there, and especially we have value to bring. People appreciate your art, even if it's a cartoon drawing. It's something that can explain that there's someone that thought about this for somebody. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining the Playroom once again. I'm wishing you an amazing week start. This week is a little tense for everybody, but we're all going to pull through.
That's right. Amen. All right. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. You guys have heard it first. Another long episode with so much information. You guys have to go back and back and back to back and check everything that we're talking about, because this is the future. This is all we're talking about. Adding value, adding propositions, being the right person at the right time for the right people with the right product or service. Feels so good right now. Wow. I'm literally just taking everything in just like you did. And I think you guys would love the episodes coming, this month. This has been a great start. And we're starting on a high note. So before we even go any further or actually leave the Playroom, check out ratethispodcast.com/we don't play. You can rate this podcast. You can rate Tony G, rate me. All of us are here to give information and add value to your life, because that's the beginning of wealth. When you're able to understand things and articulate them, then you're able to draw things down. So I don't want to go too far, and I just want to tell you guys that you have been an amazing audience. I can't wait for November, because so much is going to be popping, in this season. So I'm looking forward to reaching out to each and every one of you. Take care, be safe, stay healthy, and I love you all. God bless. Have a wonderful night. Peace.